your schema. So when you say that you are returning a type that has a string and an integer in that, and in some attributes, you are required to return as that, and GraphQL enforces that. No endpoint redundancy, because for the same reason as the first topic, the first reason, you have no issues with overfetching or underfetching, so you don't need to build a lot of endpoints to serve different data. You can have one, and the client will choose, oh, I want just the ID and the name to do a listing, or I want a lot of other stuff to show a details page. And easy access to relations, which will get more clear when we see the next slides in some examples. And no API versioning required, because you can, when you build a GraphQL type, you can deprecate any types and any fields in that and mark those as deprecated. So after that, you have some time to actually plan the removal of that field and make your API evolve without having to do V1, V2, V44, and so on. But of course, there are some cons. There are some potential security concerns if your relations are not resolved correctly. We're going to talk more about that soon. Also, some performance issues related to relations as well, which we are going to cover those two topics really soon. And caching is more complicated, because when you do a GET request, the browser can cache that request for you. For GraphQL, all requests are POST by default, so there is no way for the browser itself to cache. There are other alternatives, but we're not going to go into details in this presentation. But yeah, you don't have to fear the cons, because Strawberry got you covered. That's the whole reason I am doing this presentation today. So let's show some examples first about the pros, because let's talk about the good stuff first. So no overfetching and no underfetching, what does that mean? Suppose that we are building this request. This is something that we are going to send in the body of the HTTP request. In here, we are asking for the user that goes for the primary key 123, and we are asking it to return its ID, username, and first name. The response should look something like this. So we get exactly what we asked for, the user with the ID, username, and first name. We can change that. Supposedly, this type, the user, exposes more fields, so we can ask for more fields from it. In this case, we remove it, actually, the ID, as you can see, but we are now asking for the last ID and the list of emails from the user. And you can see that now the response looks different. So we get exactly what we asked it for. Type safe and auto-generated documentation, what does that mean? This is a typical GraphQL type that you define inside your schema. In here, we are defining a user and the emails. As you can see, the user has, as we requested, the username, first name, last name, a list of emails, as you can see here, and the email type itself. So when you look at the schema, you know what the user can provide to you, you know what the email can provide to you, and you also have even the option to document each field, similarly to how Python docstrings works. The schema does basically the same. And easy access to relations, let's look at the example again. If I access, if I ask for a user, it's easy to transverse to the emails. And also if I ask for the emails, it's easy to go back to the user and so on. You are building a graph, so in theory, from one point you can go to any place in your graph, as long as there is a path that leads to that other data. An example of that, for example, in here, looking again the same example, we requested the emails in there, and it returned the emails in there, even though it is not the same. If we talk databases, it's probably not coming from the same table. The user is one table, the list of emails is yet another table that has a foreign key to the user. And no API versioning. So let's take a look at yet another example. Suppose that in this case, we have this user type, and we want to change it. Instead of returning first name and last name, because, well, the front end maybe is not, doesn't want to have to deal with it. It just wants to show the name directly. Instead, we want to expose name. And email was a string before because we were using email from Django, for example, that comes built in the user model. But we want to convert it to a one-to-many relation with an email table. How can you do that? And we don't, instead of doing V2, V3, what we would usually do on a REST API, we can basically mark those fields as deprecated and create the new fields. So our type will have all the fields at the same time for some time, but after a while, this will give you warnings to the clients using those fields. And after a while, you can basically, okay, those fields, I am going to remove them. They are deprecated for some months now. No need to have them anymore, and your API evolves as required. So that's great. But like I showed some examples, but how can I actually write a GraphQL API? So let's start from the beginning. What you need to do. So let's define our user type. The same as the example before. I'm going to use the same example to avoid confusing and presenting some other stuff. But in here we have the user with a username, name, birth date, age, and emails. Let's also define the email type that you already saw before. It has a foreign key, a relation to the user, the email itself, which is a string, and a Boolean marking if it is the primary email for the user or not. With that, how do we actually retrieve that data? We need to define something in our query, which is basically a special type that defines the root of our queries. When we request data, the root attributes that we can access is what is defined inside the query. So as you can see here, we have a me attribute, which should return a user. Supposedly, it should return like the currently logged in user, a user that can receive an argument primary key PK and will return a user, and also a list of users with pagination capabilities. So just to exemplify, let me show a quick demo here. Hopefully during the end of the presentation, I'll be able to show some more examples in here, but this is just to do a quick demo about what I've showed so far. So in here I have this playground, which is basically a tool similar to OpenAPI Swagger, which you can use to send GraphQL queries and get the results back and see what they look like. I have it running in my, I have it, it's a Django project running in the background. So in this example, I am asking for a user that goes with the PK1 and ask for its ID and name. And when I do the request, this is what I get back. If I try another user, for example, I'll get the same data schema, but different results. I already had this prepared. So in here, it is the same as you can see user. It is the same as this. I'm just using a variable here to show that you can actually have this and pass those as variables, so those can be reused. And in here, I'm asking for the age, the ID, the age, the first name. I deprecated that field, so that's the reason it's showing like this. The name, the emails, etc. And if I ask for the user one again, you can see that it's the same data as user one in here. It is the same data, but now it has more fields. If I go to user two, it's the same as well. So going back to the presentation. Okay. Working. Okay, now it's working. So, but you might be thinking now, okay, that doesn't make sense. You showed a lot of GraphQL queries, schemas, but how can we actually do that in Python? That's not why we are here. to learn about. So yeah, let's do that. So going from the beginning, I said that the first thing that you need to do is to define your types. So let's look again at our types. How can we do that in Python? Anyone that is familiarized with data classes, Pydantic will know what is going on here, but it is very easy to see that we can represent those types as those data classes. We have the user data class in here, the email, the string is converted to an str, the other string here is converted to an str or none. You might be thinking, why or none? Because this one has an exclamation point, which means it can't be null. So this one, by default, can be null, so or none, and so on. And how can I use that inside my Strawberry project? You just change data classes to strawberry.type. What is happening there is that strawberry.type is basically a wrapper on top of data classes that enhances it and tells the schema what the schema is and does some other magic that happens behind the scenes. So let's define now that we have our types defined, let's start defining our root queries. So let's start with the me field. The query is basically a type as I showed to you before. So we can basically do the same. Oh my God, I'm sorry. We can do the same. Decorate a class with strawberry.type and type me as user or none, because, well, if the user is not logged in, that should return null. But now, okay, so you might be thinking, okay, GraphQL now knows that me returns a user or none, but how does it know how to fetch data from it? And the answer is it doesn't know. We need to tell it how to fetch the data. So that is where resolver comes in. In this case, we are still typing the me as user or none, but we are now assigning it to strawberry.field, which is also similar to data classes.field, and passing a resolver to it. So anytime that we try to resolve a me field, the get user function is going to be returned to it's going to be called, and its return is going to be returned inside that field. Another approach, and the one that I actually prefer to use, is to use the strawberry.field as a decorator instead of doing it like that, because then your code is more contained inside the code, inside the type itself, and makes it is more legible, at least in my opinion. And also going now to the user that receives a PK argument, you can see that it receives an argument. So, but how can we tell that in Python? As simple as passing an argument to our resolver function and typing it. So Strawberry is going to introspect your function and use its return value and also its return type, and also the type annotations in your arguments to generate the final GraphQL schema. The same for the users here, going really quickly because it's basically the same as the example before. We converted the arguments limiting offset to Python arguments. The only difference in here is that we are returning a list of users instead of a single user. So in the end, I went step by step in that, but in the end, that is what our final query is going to look like in Python, with the 3 dots in there because I can't fit all the code together in there. But now let's dive into Django itself. How does that all connect to Django? So let's use this model as an example. The same as we had before. So we have this model in Django user, first name, last name, birth date, all using char fields and date fields. How can we return it in our API? So using what we learned so far, you probably are already guessing how we can do that. And yeah, the most basic way of doing that is basically defining your type and defining a strawberry field, querying for the user in here, and instantiating the user type itself with the I need to stop moving my mouse. and instantiating the user type itself with the data from the model. The email, we can do the same for the email. I think there is oh, I'm sorry, I got confused with another slide. So we also have the email model in our database, and we can, of course, do the same with it. In this case, the only difference is that the user was a root query, so we wanted to return it inside the query type itself. Now, the email is a subfield of the user type. So we can also use the strawberry field inside any types, be it the query type or in this case, the user type. And the resolver is going to do it exactly what we expect it to do. It will do an email.objects.filter to filter by the user that goes by the PK inside this user type and return a list of the email types instantiated. But you might be thinking, okay, that seems scheduled, right? Is there a way to reduce that boilerplate code, because we are basically just doing what REST would be doing. So Strawberry Django comes through the rescue now, which is the integration itself. What we need to do, let's take again our user type. Instead of using strawberry.type, we can now use strawberry.django.type and pass the user model to it. What that will do, that will basically link the user type itself with the user model and use that to do some magic behind the scenes. The first one is basically that. So we note that we are now typing the model. We can still type the other way just to make this clear, but we can now start using strawberry.auto to type our fields. What will happen behind the scenes is that the integration will introspect our model that is linked, and you'll say, okay, so I have a name, Strawberry Auto. It will go to the model and see, oh, it's a char field. So since it is a char field, I will type it as a string. Or if it is a char field that can be null, it will type it as an str or none, and so on. The second thing that the integration is going to provide is, okay, and just another example about the auto. Oh no, this is actually what I was going to say. Another thing that the integration is going to provide is automatic resolver generations. So in this case, remember that we had this boilerplate code to return the users. Now we can just say that emails is a list to email type. Because we have strawberry.django.type as decorating the type, it knows that emails is actually a related manager to the email type, to the email model, and it will automatically generate a resolver that will basically do something very similar to what we are seeing on the left side here, but you don't actually need to do that yourself. Unless you want, of course, you can always do the manual way, but this is something that the integration will provide to allow you to write less boilerplate code. And this also applies to root queries as well. Remember that we had user and users in here, and we had to define a resolver to find the user, another resolver to list the users. Now we can just do this. The main difference in here is that because query itself is a strawberry type, is not a strawberry Django type, we need to assign it to strawberry Django.field for the magic to happen. But in the end, what will be happening is for the user, for example, because it is typed as a single type, a single strawberry Django type, it will automatically generate a resolver that receives APK and returns the model itself, similar to this that we had before. For the users, the only difference is that because the annotation is using a list, it will instead generate a query that returns a list as well. There are built-in options to add filtering, ordering, pagination, and also there are some security stuff that we're going to talk more in a bit. But that is what the integration is going to do automatically for you. Okay, so that's great. But what about the cons? That exactly what I was talking about. Maybe you already are concerned about some of the stuff that I showed here. So let's remember those. The main ones that I listed was the potential security concerns, potential performance issues, and caching is more complicated. As I said, not going to go into caching today because we don't have actually the time to go into that. But let's start with the security concerns. So in our examples, as you probably might have already noticed, we are exposing our list of users to everyone that has access to our API. That is, of course, not good. So how can we avoid that? Suppose that we want only staff users, so those where user.isStaff is true, to be able to access those. So the first thing that comes to mind is that. So we go back to our manual resolver generation, and we can see who is the user that is requesting the data, and check if he is a staff or not. If he is not, raise permission denied, otherwise return the list of users. This also is introducing info, which is something that when you add, Strawberry is going to pass it, which is an object where you can access the current context of the resolution. And in this case, for example, we are using to access the request object from Django itself. That's the reason why I can retrieve the user that is doing the request there. But now it seems that we can't rely on the automatic resolvers anymore, right? Well, it's kind of true, but Strawberry Django comes to the rescue again, and it provides a set of useful extensions that you can use. You can actually customize those for your own needs, but there are some built-in that you can use. For example, the isStaff one. So in this case, the users list, we are passing isStaff extensions to it, which will basically, what will happen there when the user is going to, the user's field is going to be resolved. Before that, Strawberry is going to check the condition, which is, is user.isStaff true? If it is, it will allow the resolution to happen. Otherwise, it will fail. So now, going a bit deeper, and the examples here are very similar, but note that there is a difference. In here, we are querying the users in the query type. In here, we are querying the emails inside the user type. Sure.
So it's called extensions and not permissions. Why? Because there are other.
There are permissions as well, but like extensions are something that acts like a middleware on top of fields, and they are required because there are also some ways to check for permissions after the object has been resolved. But I'll also talk a bit or not give an example because we don't have time. But so moving on. In here, for example, so now because we are using the extensions for the isStaff for the list of users, okay, so only staff users can see our users. Great. But maybe we don't want all of those users to see the emails list for for our users. Maybe, okay, they can list it, but only super users can see the emails. No, it's not a problem. We can just go to the user type and use the eSuperUser extension inside the user type. And even though the staff users are going to be allowed to list all the users, they're not, if they try somehow to access the emails, they're going to be presented with an error. Just to mention that, so you can see that there are a lot of built-in options in there. We have also a hasperm, which you can use. Django has some built-in for that. Can add, can edit, can delete. I don't remember exactly the name. You can define your own, but you can also use custom permissions for that. So if only users that has user.canSeeBirthDate to it can see the birth date of a user, that can be used to do that check. And as I was telling now, it also provides, I'm not going to show some examples because this starts to get more complicated, but it also provides a way to check for permissioning on top of the object. So if you have when you have permissioning on a set of objects inside the same model. So there are third parties that implements those kind of permissioning checks, such as Django Guardian, and we actually use Django Guardian as one of the integrations that we have. But so just so you know that this exists and you can actually do this. And moving on now, we talked about security concerns. Let's talk about performance issues. So GraphQL has an intrinsic N+1 issue. Can you figure out why? Basically, because the client can choose whatever he wants, like one of the first pro that I have talked about, that also means that we can't know beforehand all the combinations of fields that the user is going to request to us. So let's look at this example. In case, when listing all the users, in case the client also requests the list of emails, and suppose that this list is going to return 1,000 users, we now are producing 1,001 queries in our database. And this is actually the reason why it's called N+1 issue, in case someone didn't know that, because one query to list the users and one for each user that gets returned, thus N+1. One way we can fix this issue is by doing this at the end. Instead of just returning the users, we can use prefetch related, something that Django provides for us to prefetch related objects and avoid N+1 issues. But now we have another issue. Like, it's not a major one, it's actually okay, mostly. For this example, might not be for other examples, that we are prefetching emails even if the user doesn't ask it. Like if the client just asks for the user's ID, why are we still retrieving the emails if we are not going to use it? So it's better than we had before, but still not great. So how can we actually avoid N+1 issues using the built-in query optimizer extension that we have inside Strawberry Django? This is something that I have not showed before, but it's how you define your schema. This is what is going to be exposed in endpoint using URLs in Django. But you just add the Django Optimizer extension, and that's pretty much it. And what I mean by that's pretty much it. So the extension is going to magically introspect your query. Because your query is using known types that are linked to the models, it can know that, oh, okay, so I am asking for ID, first name, and the email inside emails. So this is the end result that the optimizer is going to do when querying for those users. It's going to do a dot only for ID, first name, and a prefetch related for doing a custom prefetch in this case, because we also only ask it for email inside email. So you can see that even the optimization even goes nested in this case. Another example would be the other way around. So suppose that we have an API, an endpoint similar to the user. So you can retrieve a user given a PK. In this case, we can retrieve an email given a PK. This is similar to the previous example, but now this can be resolved with a join instead of a prefetch related. And that's what the optimizer is going to do. In this case, it's going to do a select related, to do the join on top of the, to join the user table on the email, and also do to only select what you want. And you can see that in this case, he's doing a get later to get the email for that ID. But not all cases can be automatically optimized for by the optimizer. This is an example. If suppose that we have a field called age, which since we have the birth date, we can calculate the age very easily and return it as an integer. The code should be correct, hopefully, but like when you request age, there is no age there is no age column in your model. So how does the optimizer know that what you are going to be using inside it? So it does not know, but you can give him a hint in this case. So when defining your field, you can pass only equals to a list of only, and it will know that, okay, so when age gets selected, because I gave him a hint that he should also add to the only list birth date, he's going to also add to the only list birth date, and you can safely access birth date in here without ending up having, in this case, N+1 issues again, because Django did not load that birth date, and now it tries to load it, and suddenly it needs to go to the database to fetch it. Any combination of only select related, prefetch related can be used as hints, and more recently also annotations, which is still somewhat experimental, but mostly working. So a quick summary to why use the query optimizer. It's straightforward usage. Like mostly you need to just enable it and forget about it. When you can't just use it, you can use optimization hints, and those works usually very nice. Not only it solves N+1 issues, but also improves performance. Like a quick example, suppose you have a table with, I don't know, 50 columns, and you are only requesting 2 of those columns. There is no need for you to retrieve the whole table inside your Django model. Just return those 2. Like even though you are still not returning those to the client itself, you are still having a large payload. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. A large payload traveling between your database and your API, which it is a minor improvement, but it is there. But of course, there are some disadvantages, and the main one that I would say is that it's not possible to solve very complex issues especially for unrelated data, those that you cannot do a select related, prefetch related. For those, you can use data loaders, which is a feature that Strawberry itself provides. It is inside its documentation. Usually I use those a lot for some more complex scenarios. It works great. The only downside is that you need to be running ASGI to use data loaders. Some additional features provided by Strawberry Django itself. So it's async friendly. You can run it with WSGI or ASGI, sync or async, whatever you prefer. It works. Running WSGI, the only downside is that you can't use data loaders, but other than that, everything should work great. Queued mutations, it also provides some easily to create tools to do huge mutations, so create, update, delete mutations. I have not covered mutations in here, but think of them of queries that modify data. Cursor pagination, so there is a built-in support for doing cursor pagination in an easy way. Usually limiting offset is enough for most use cases, but sometimes you need something more advanced, and Strawberry does provide a way for you to build that more easily without having to go into the bare bones of everything. The debug toolbar integration. So as you might have seen in my example, there was a debug toolbar hidden in there, but I can use it to see the queries that when I execute a query, to see what DB queries actually happened, the performance, and so on. Django channels integration to use with subscription for real-time data, which is also another functionality of GraphQL itself that I'm not going to cover here. There is a lot to dig deeper inside GraphQL itself. And, well, what to do now? I have listed here some resources, which I think those are useful, mostly like the Strawberry web page, the documentation, the Strawberry documentation, which right now is living in its own website, but it's being merged together with the Strawberry main one. Also, be sure to join our Strawberry, our Discord channel. The community around there is very friendly. Feel free to ask questions, report issues to us. And also I've listed some extra GraphQL resources which I think are nice, not actually related to Strawberry itself, but to GraphQL in general. And I'm going to show the last page in here, but I think we still have time. I'm not sure. Is the guy here there? Because I have some more examples to show, but I think it would be nice to go with the Q&A first. And that's it. Thank you very much for attending this talk. So, does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
How do you handle this reflexive relationship? I mean, like a user depending on a user, like with a foreign key, you know?
You mean self relations?
Self relations.
Yeah, no, those works. I actually had an example like that, but I decided to remove because it was too complex. But the same way as when you create a data class, you can do you can annotate it to itself. Of course, you need to put it in as a string because it is not ready yet to be used. But it works literally just like that, and GraphQL allows types to relate to themselves. It's a very common, for example, you have a user and user has a list of friends. Friends is a list of user itself. So it just works.
But how do you handle if the user, if the request will require like several nesting levels? You know what I mean?
So, I see.
I mean, this will have an impact on the performance.
Yeah.
And have you a way to avoid that?
Yes. So yes, it can cause some performance impacts. There is ways to overcome this. One way is like there are built-in extensions on Strawberry itself where you can. Oh my God! I need to stop doing that. There is ways for you to be able to limit like the depth that you can dig into a relation, and like if you try to go deeper than that, Strawberry itself is going to raise an error and will not allow you to go there. But regarding the, like when you resolve, for example, if I have a user and the user has a name and has friends, so their friends has a name that possibly has friends, you can just go there indefinitely. You can use fragments as a way to avoid duplicating, which is something for like it is think of it as a template that you can use to query the data inside it. So you don't need to repeat everything that you are requesting from the user inside the friends. But the graphical specs themselves does not allow infinite recursion. So you need to define the depth that you are going to go in your client.
How do the mutations work when you're posting data?
Okay, so mutations, they are actually really similar to queries. Like if you take the graphical specs, they define that queries and mutations are basically the same thing. So as you could see, like for example, queries, I have a user that receives a PK. Well, I can actually pass data and do a create user in there. And that's basically what a mutation is going to do. The only difference is how the spec dictates that the server must behave when executing queries and mutations. So when you have a query, you can do a lot of queries at the same time, and the spec says that they can be resolved in parallel. So if I am asking for, I don't know, 3 users using the user itself in the same query, they can be fetched in parallel, but a mutation should happen sequentially. So if one fails, the other ones should not execute at all. And that's basically the difference. But when defining Strawberry, you are defining a field as well. Instead of Strawberry field, you are defining Strawberry.mutation. That's the only difference.
And the validation and checks, like the age has to be more than 18 for a user to be created. So those things, where do you define? Like in the Django REST framework, you would define.
Yeah, that is your graphical doesn't dictate how you do things. You are returning age, which is an integer. If let's use the mutation example. Like you are receiving a birth date, and you don't want it to be lower than 19. Don't know. In your resolver, you can add a check for that and raise validation error, for example, just like Django does. Actually, when creating the user, Django itself is going to, if you have the validation there, and it will fail. Strawberry Django does provide a way even for you to return those validation errors as a way to help your front end to show them, just like Django admin does. I did not go into details about that in here, but if you want, I can show you some examples later.
And how are the duplication messages shown? Are they also shown in the GraphQL answer, or just on the?
Not in the answer, but they will usually, like when you are using a client, it depends on how they are going to warn you. Some, for example, there are code generators that you are going to write a query. And for this, actually, I made a suggestion about one, the last link in there, that they are going to automatically generate TypeScript types for you, for your queries. And that one is going to raise warning, just like when you run ESLint or Flake8 or Rough, it's going to say, oh, this is okay, what you are doing, but be warned that this will not be okay anymore soon. And usually your language server is also going to, when using VS Code or whatever IDE that has a language server that can interpret GraphQL, it is probably going to show it and show an error for you. Oh, you are using something that is deprecated. So that is a warning for you, developer, that you should probably not be using that anymore. That's basically how it works. Go ahead, Dev, and then you.
I would like to understand the concept of API versioning, because you said, well, if you just create a new attribute like name instead of first name and last name, you create full name. So, but it is going to affect the client side. So, how do we? Well, I would like to understand the key difference with REST API, because if you change the attributes of the API resources, it is going to affect the client side.
So not really, because you are creating a new attribute. Based on that fact, no clients still are requesting that attribute, so they are not yet receiving name. So for someone that's not that is not selecting name yet, for them the response is going to be actually the same. Only when they see that first name was deprecated and they start to request the name itself, then that is when like their payload is going to actually change. So that is basically like you can add anything that you want extra in your type, as long as the user is not selecting it. There is no changes for them at all, and as long as you do not remove anything or like change anything, like change the type. Oh, now name instead of being a string is for some whatever weird reason an integer. That is going to break. But like you can deprecate name and I don't know, create a name as int and say, oh, okay, this is deprecated. You should now use name as int and parse it to I don't know, something like that. Did that answer your question? Awesome.
Yeah, my question is about that magic autofill. Is it possible to make it serialize your own types, your own field types, and also override the default ones?
Yes. So the autofields, by default, they have a map that they will link. So, for example, char field is mapped to an str, and so on. And you can, the map is public. You can import it and override it. You can even say, oh, okay, so char field is now going to use my char type, which I will have some attributes inside for some reason. You are free to override those or add more fields inside it.
And is there a place?
Yes, that is the place. Like if you want a lot more complex stuff, maybe I don't know if Strawberry GraphQL would allow it. Strawberry Django, I'm sorry, but like you can always open an issue, contact me, and we can see how to change the API to accommodate that. But the simplest answer, and I know because I've done a lot, I use it to have a lot of custom fields in my projects, and instead of allowing Strawberry Django to use something, or sometimes it is so custom that it doesn't have like a base to compare, I mapped it to a custom type, for example.
One question maybe related to GraphQL. How do you handle recursion errors? Because for example,
Let me get closer to because I'm not.
Yeah. My question is maybe more related to GraphQL and is to like how do you handle recursion errors, because the user model has a list of emails and emails has the user attributes. So maybe there's like some mechanism to stop the recursion error at some point.
Oh, I see. Yes, that is similar to his question. In theory, like the GraphQL itself doesn't dictate what you can or cannot do. In theory, you can just recurse infinitely. You just can't do that. Like you can't use fragments, for example, that are recursive. But as long as you are willing to actually type everything in there, you can. But during the execution, Strawberry itself provides extensions so you can check, for example, the depth, and stop at a given point. We have been also developing some extensions. For example, there is a depth, a max depth that you can go if you set it, for example, to 4. You can't go lower than 4. So user emails, and that's it. You can't get the user anymore. But you can also write your own. It's very easy using the extension provider that we have. And also, if there is something that Strawberry is not doing and you think it can do better, feel free always to open an issue, talk to us, and we can check to see a way to make it work there. And also always open to contributions.
I haven't used GraphQL so far, but does it play well with Django REST framework. Because when I see this, giving you a real world scenario, it's like it fits very well the case of our company, where we have a model that has many fields, and over time it evolved in terms of APIs really badly. So we have like 4 or 5 APIs that fetch from the same model, but
Okay.
returns different fields. And then you never know which API to use, or sometimes you need an API that combines 2 fields that they have no API in common. So when
Yeah.
I see this, I see, oh, that's a good way for me to just get all these APIs from the trash
Yeah.
and have a one source of truth to fetch these fields, and then I can keep, for example, the creation still on REST framework. Would they play well together?
Yeah, like you can have both exposed because GraphQL is a single point of entry. Like you are going to expose your schema in /GraphQL. Everything else is there for you. All requests, like I'm requesting user, requesting email, it's going to go to /GraphQL. So you can do that, but I don't know if the question is if you can adjust your REST serializers, for example, to Strawberry. If that's the question, they are very similar, but we don't have like a Graphene, for example, which is another Strawberry library, another GraphQL library. I think they have something similar, but we don't. But the way you define is very similar to REST framework serializers. Yeah, as you could see, the only difference is that instead of defining a meta and the fields, you define them as auto, and when you have like a serializer method, you define a custom resolver. So it is very the skills translates very well from one to another, but not code-wise, like you can just get one and adapt to the other. You might need some more fine adjustments.
Yeah, but I could still use GraphQL to fetch and use REST framework to create.
Sure. When you start to fetching, you are going to want to start mutating as well, I'm sure. But yeah, like you can have both together. It's not an issue. Go ahead first and
I have a tiny experience with Graphene Django.
okay.
What would you say is advantage of Strawberry compared to Graphene?
Oh, so I think that two main things that comes to my mind, 3 actually. The first one is, well, Strawberry is more idiomatic Python. It's using type annotations when you see a GraphQL type, it is very easy for you to see how it will look like on the schema. Like it's almost a one-to-one mapping between both. Also, I'm not sure, like I used it to use Graphene in the past. I actually, before I became a Strawberry core developer, I started using it because I was seeking an alternative because Graphene itself, it is going through some hard times. Like the main developers from it are not there anymore. There are some people trying to start maintaining it, but I don't know how Graphene is going to be in the future. Like it has a very stable API, it just works. But speaking of this point, Strawberry is very actively maintained. Not only me, like the creator itself, Patrick, a great friend of mine. I was together with him until yesterday, and he's actively maintaining Strawberry. We are always, the community is great. If you go to the Strawberry Discord, not only me, Patrick itself, and anyone will always welcome you very, very warmly. Even the users in there are going to help you if you need. So I would say those are the main differences. Hope that answers. And you have another question?
Actually, it was more or less the same question. Asking, we also use Graphene Django, and I sometimes have the impression that it was not so well maintained, and I wanted to ask if it makes sense to switch to Strawberry, but I think...
Yeah, that is When I started questioning that, that is when I started seeking for the alternatives. I saw Strawberry, I felt in love with it. Then suddenly I was contributing to Strawberry Django. Suddenly Patrick asked me, "Oh, your contributions are great. You wanted to maintain the project? Sure, let's do this." And when I saw it, I was also a Strawberry Core developer and maintainer, and here I am today. So when I say like go for Strawberry, that is also from the perspective of someone that used to use Graphene and decided to move to Strawberry because thought it was better in that like 2 years ago or 3 years ago actually, even more. So a lot more of improvements happened since then. Oh, so yeah, I just ran out of time. So thank you all for attending. And if you have any questions, I'll be around during those 3 days. So feel free to reach me.